No Money But Dreams podcast is for those millennial dreamers
who try to be in the top 1%.
It doesn't matter what we've achieved.
We wake up every morning with the mindset that we're still broke,
We welcome you on our journey in search of that home run.
which can change everything.
Everything?
Everything.
Welcome to another episode of the No Money But Dreams podcast, where we speak to business leaders and entrepreneurs in the region. Today, we are really privileged to have Mr. Navid Nazemian, correct, with us on this episode, who is actually a master of executive transition coaching. You are a transition coach for executives. I was lucky enough to be introduced to you through a mutual friend. We had a discussion which I thought was going to last 15 minutes, and we spent almost an hour and a half having a talk. And I was really blown away about the knowledge that you have in the specific niche that you've chosen to focus on. But even more, I'm so inspired about a story of a solopreneur. I think more and more people are seeing that there is an opportunity to take the knowledge that they have grasped through their experiences in life and then apply them and actually charge quite a large amount, providing that the problem is big enough. So thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to share all the knowledge and experience that you have with the listeners.
Thank you, Alexander, for the warm welcome, and I am stoked to be part of this conversation today.
And that's amazing. So who is Navid, and what's your mission?
Yes, so I am on a mission indeed, and my mission is to help more and more executive leaders to go through transitions more successfully and do it with ease. And the numbers are quite staggering and quite shocking. 4 out of 10 executives do not actually make it.
Wow.
And so it's become my life's mission now to help more of those succeed and do it with ease and grace.
And how long have you been on this mission?
I have spent 26 years of my professional life working full-time as an employee in some of the world's most admired companies. And I have been now a solopreneur for just over 2 years.
Wow. And how's the journey been so far, being a solopreneur?
It's been an incredible transition. I mean, even in my wildest dreams, I didn't imagine this to be so wonderful and really impactful at the same time. So I had obviously some worries, as in, will I be able to run my own business? Because, once you are used as an executive working in a corporate structure, you essentially have all the support you need. But then doing your own thing, as exciting as it sounds, comes with its own challenges. So I wasn't quite sure I'm up for it, but it's just been over 3 years and I never look back.
What exactly is executive transition in layman's terms?
Sure. So it's helping a senior leader to step into the C-suite, or if they're already part of the C-suite, to move into a role that is substantially bigger and more complex than the one they had. So typical examples are, if you're in the finance function, you're a finance director, you move into your first chief finance officer position. If you're in the HR field and you're an HR director or a head of HR, you move into your first chief people officer position. And if you're already an established chief people officer, you will move into your chief people officer into a much larger, much more complex, much more table stakes type position. So that's the definition of what the client is. And then the transition coaching is essentially helping those leaders to succeed during the first 12 months of being appointed.
And those first 12 months are kind of like the critical time period.
Yes.
Whether they win or lose. And you said that there's a 40% chance that they're going to lose.
That is correct. And despite a common belief, this is down to a very popular book that was written just over 20 years ago, The First 90 Days, which is a wonderful book for first-time managers and, generally speaking, anyone who wants to be a little more structured about the onboarding. I just realized that, having worked at the executive level and working in the HR field, supporting hundreds of those executives and myself, the first 90-day approach is just nowhere near sufficient to help them succeed, which is why I came up with my own framework. It's called the Double Diamond Framework of Executive Transitions, and it's a 12+ months journey.
And how did you decide your niche? Because a lot of people obviously see solopreneurs, They see people who are becoming a business of one. There's books about it. Social media endorses it. LinkedIn is full of people who are teaching people how to be on LinkedIn. How did you, with your 26-year career, decide, okay, this is the problem that I'm going to solve, and I'm going to niche down on that?
Yes. So first off, allow me to be super transparent about this. I wish I was that strategically foresighted, Alexander, 10 years ago to say, you know what, in 10 years' time, I'm going to write an international best-selling book. I will then jump ship from the big corporate. I will be named the #1 coach in the world by CEO today. And that's going to be my niche, and that's going to, be what I would love to do. It really evolved over time. And so I didn't have a particular focus to find a niche. It just happened that more and more of the work that I did was in this particular niche. And so it really literally was, 2 years before my book finished, it took me 7 years to write this wonderful book. So 5 years in, I didn't even have an actual working title. I know it's about career transitions. I knew it's about successful interventions. I knew it's about avoiding the biggest mistakes, but I really didn't know exactly how to name it, how to put it, how to craft it. All I knew is the work that I do works, and the support that I give to those executives as a coach is highly appreciated. So it was really the culmination of all these things that emerged in the title of the book. And that's about the same time where I actually changed my coach title from executive coach to executive transition coach.
And how important was it to kind of publish a book in giving you the credibility, number one, but also maybe forcing you to put all your ideas on paper? It's very difficult to write a book. It's not an easy task. And I think there's a lot of self-reflection that needs to go in it, because you say, okay, I'm going to write a book. I'm sure halfway through you're like, holy shit, what am I, like, where is this going? Like, I have maybe 30 pages. I need 120. I need to, focus. How did that help you?
Yes. So again, I actually made a post about this about 2 weeks ago on LinkedIn. I post once a week on LinkedIn, and it's really my journey of how much of a struggle it was to write this book. As you said, I thought of this project to be a year-long project. I'm a pretty ambitious guy, and it's a topic that I felt very knowledgeable about. And so it wasn't really something that I wanted to figure out first and then think about it. But despite that, it was a hard push. And so I had crafted about 60 pages after 6 years. And it was only when I met a gentleman virtually called Professor Eric Costa, who is a Georgetown University professor who runs an online book writing class. At the time, it was called the Creators Institute. Today, it's called something else. But really, it really helped me to start to create a skeleton framework to write against. And it really gave me some ideas around how to be more structured and more intentful with the research and the writing. So that's a reality. I don't want to pretend that I just took 6 months out. I went to Bali and meditated every day and came back with a beautiful book manuscript. But then, of course, as and when the book launched, it really opened doors for me. I think it's also fair to say that the book was the main reason why I jumped ship from the big corporate, because at the time of its launch, it became a #1 new release on Amazon. I did a pre-launch campaign upon the recommendation of Eric, and I was very skeptical about this. I want to be very honest here. So he said, you have the idea of this great book. How about you put the idea on one of these, GoFundMe type platforms, and to recover the cost that you would need to pay to a publisher to get it published. And I was really skeptical for two reasons. One, I did have the money to pay down the publisher, so that wasn't really my issue. And the second reason I was highly hesitant was that I wasn't sure if it's going to work. Like, who's going to put money into a campaign for a book that they haven't even read yet?
Yeah.
So I was highly skeptical if that idea is going to work. And of course, Eric being Eric, my campaign raised 566% of the amount that I needed. So I oversold the book already before it was published. And I think ironically, that actually led to the fact that it became a #1 release on Amazon on day one, because I was not a published author yet. I was not a known author yet. But because of all the buzz and because of all the social media noise, it became a bestseller in the US in the first week after its launch. It then became a bestseller in the UK, Germany, Switzerland. By now, it's an international bestseller. So coming back to your original question as to how important it is to have a book, of course it helps, right? I mean, if you're an international best-selling author on the topic that you happen to coach, well, I think that's probably the best way to establish your authority. And again, having a book is a great thing, but having your book to be endorsed by other thought leaders in the field is really what's worked well for me. And again, I wouldn't be able to buy any of those endorsements even if I wanted to. But you know, if other real heavy hitters in the field say incredible things about your work, that in itself establishes you as a thought leader and authority in your own field.
Now, I picked something out in that conversation. This gentleman basically kind of maybe was a mentor to you.
Yeah, he's a book writing coach. Yes.
How important was his belief in you to get you to follow his instructions? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, I can't stress how important it is to have a mentor or to have someone who you can work with, almost like an apprenticeship kind of model, that allows you to maybe not question yourself at times where you're kind of on the fence.
Yes. I mean, the ironic part of this whole thing is I'm an executive transition coach and I help, C-suite leaders to succeed all the time. But it took me roughly 6 years to figure out, if you struggle with something, how about taking up the support of someone who has helped other people like yourself to succeed with the same thing?
Yeah.
So at the time, I can't remember exactly, but I think he had helped 400 wannabe authors to become published authors.
Wow.
By now, the number is 1,200 or even larger than that. So that is really the kind of support that I needed. I just didn't have awareness that sort of a support exists and in such an impactful way. So yes, of course, it's crucial to have that support. But again, if you feel self-sufficient, if you feel equipped, if you have had success to, write and publish your own book previously, you may consider if that's the right support for you. But certainly for me and other people in my position, it was an invaluable support.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, I feel like we you're very niche, you're very focused, but also we underestimate how you can reach out to somebody who is an expert in that particular field and literally spend a month with them or 2 months, absorb all the information in a much faster time period than if you were trying to do it on your own.
Yes.
And the internet has allowed us to have access to people who are in certain niches like yourself, that there is so much value that can be taken from these people, but you need to be aware of it and you need to be open to looking. And the internet allows you to search and find anything.
Yes.
But so many people don't use it to the full potential that it has.
To use a concrete example, so in a matter of 6 months of starting to work with Eric, not only did I produce another 180 pages to the 60 that I had produced in 6 years, but it actually became the manuscript of a best-selling book. So it really was. And by the way, he's not known to be the expert on non-fiction books. He told me that right away. He said, look, out of the, I don't know how many books he had helped others publish at the time, the majority of them are fiction books, right? But the way I work is I don't have to have any knowledge about your actual field of expertise. What I know that works, and I'm happy to share that with you, is the framework and the how-to. And the rest is obviously work that you have to put in. So that was really a transformational journey for me. And again, I am incredibly grateful. And I've put him in touch with many, many other people since then.
Let's take a look at your business model. What are the products that you offer, number one? And number two, how did you decide that those were the 2 or 3 products that you wanted to launch with? And has it changed in the past 3 years?
Sure. So again, I don't think too much about those things even today. What I do is, what is it that I'm really, really good at? And how can that be reaching the customers or the people that would mostly benefit from it. And everything else kind of falls in the right place after that. So I didn't have a particular idea about, oh, I want to offer 10 services and they need to be in line with this and that. I really started out with what I am, doing best, which is helping executive leaders to transition successfully, full stop. So that became my core product, still is today. So that roughly, if I were to look at my time allocation, I spend 80% of my time helping those C-suite executives to either transition into the C-suite or from the C-suite into a role that is bigger and more complex. 20% of the 80%, I accompany them as an entire leadership team. This is something that's evolved over the years. So
you didn't start with that?
I did not start with that. Having been in the HR field for 20 years, I have certainly been a customer to those coaches and team coaches that, have come in and helped the entirety of the leadership team to, to lift their performance from good to great. And of course, I've learned a few things along the way, but I think this really started with a lot of my CEO clients who 6 months into the 12 months program, when we kind of hit the topic of the team, turned around and said, can you also help me with the team? And of course I can, because again, I've been a buyer of those services and I've been a recipient of those services for over 20 years. And so that's, if the totality of it is 80%, 20% of that is an entire leadership team journeys. And then the other 20% of the 100% that's left is I use on my international best-selling book. So whether it's webinars, whether it's being a guest on podcasts like this, whether it's book signing events, conference speaking, everything that really helps me to connect with my audience, for me, is a good means. Now, I have one fundamental belief, which is I never pay for that. So, it may be a silly thing to say. I've never done Google ads or, LinkedIn ads or anything like that. I've just had this belief that what I do is unique. And if I can find ways to make this work accessible to a larger number of people, that's a good thing. And that's what I would like to pursue.
And as far as customer acquisition goes, how did you get your first customer?
Yes. So the very first coaching customers, this was part of my coach training back in the year 2014. And so we had to find customers that, want to do the work with us. And I was actually keen at the time to not offer this as a freebie. Of course, I was a coach in training, so I was not a qualified accredited coach yet. And yet, I always saw this as a very valuable support. And so I found, I'd reached out to a few leaders that I knew at the time, and 3 of them agreed to go in the trenches with me. And so that is the very first time, and I'm very glad to say the last time I actually reached out to find customers. Since then, roughly 80% of my clients are based on referrals, and the other 20% find me through LinkedIn. So those are the only 2 sources of, customer acquisition that I have.
How did it feel the first time someone offered you money for your services that wasn't in your normal day job? Or
Yes, it felt good. And to be quite honest, I actually didn't need the money because my executive role more than paid for the lifestyle, the mortgage and everything else. And so I think it actually helped me also today a lot that I did find my own way to acquiring new clients without having the money worry or the money concern in the back of my mind. I mean, it's really, I see that as an established senior leader in the field of HR, when you're sitting across someone else and they are desperate to find a job, whether they admit it or not, you can
smell it.
Yeah, you can really, it's a felt sense of that. And the same applies to coaches, who are desperate to find the next client because the next, mortgage rate payment is down. And so I really was happy that I could do this for about 10 years on the side without needing the money. And when I decided it's the right time for me to jump ship, I didn't have to think hard and long about what is it that I want to do and how am I going to do it. I actually just announced on LinkedIn that I'm open for business because Alexander, you may not know, but I had at the time clients that were happy to wait for me for up to a year to do the work with me because I could only coach about 3 people. That's the capacity I had. And when I announced on LinkedIn that I'm open for business, of course, my diary opened widely. And that was really the best thing that I could do to let those prospective customers know that I'm open for business.
Giving advice to people who are looking to be solopreneurs, how important is it? I mean, you already touched on it, but how important is it to do the work on the side until it gets to the point where you're pretty sure that you can leave your actual job and do this full time?
Yes.
Because as you said, that feeling of desperation, but there's 2 sides to the desperation. When a human is very hungry, sometimes they go above and beyond to execute something, and that can be a positive for them. But by the same time, that desperation kind of reeks or is compounded into your clients and kind of makes them feel like maybe we don't want to work with this person. What would be your advice to people to stay in their job, work on their side hustle until their side hustle gets to a point where they can jump ship?
So my data point is very limited, which is my own kind of experience. And so I really have no idea what it would be like if you were to start from scratch and try to grow something. I'm sure there will be plenty of examples of those as well. The beauty that I found in the way I did it was that I could explore whether this passion idea of mine is real.
Yeah.
I could, get in the trenches. I could kind of get my feet into the water without going into the deep ocean and trying to figure out how to get to the bottom. I really felt that the fact that I had a highly paid executive job really helped me to not focus too much on the financials at the outset. And the fact that I really then had a felt sense of what an amazing feeling it is to do the work, to be in the field, really made it easy for me to make the jump and establish myself. So that's what I can only talk about. I can't talk about anything else than this.
One key point there is not to worry about the financials. That can be iterated to a young entrepreneur, is that find somebody and work for free, and figure out what you're good at and where you can give value. And when you are giving value, the person you're giving it to at one point will be like, yo, I need to pay you. Like I can't, you're giving me so much value, I want to remunerate you. And I think a lot of people don't think about that. And a lot of people who are younger entrepreneurs, they want to make the money quickly, but they don't realize how much value you have to deliver before somebody is actually going to part with their money.
Sure. I mean, what I can speak to what you just said, Alexander, is the fact that it's actually an established standard in the coaching field, which is, it's called a chemistry session or a chemistry conversation. It's usually 30 to 45 minutes long. And that session is usually the first interaction you have with a real prospective client. That session is always for free. And what I like to do in that session is obviously learn more about the customer, their need, and what is my relatable experience to that and how I've helped others to achieve the same. But also I would love to give them a bit of a flavor of what it's like to do the work with me. So that's why my coaching chemistry sessions are usually 45 minutes and not 30 minutes, because I can then use 50 minutes of that time to give the prospective customer a flavor of what it's like to do the work with me. That's the only freebie I offer, and nothing more than that. And then the rest is down to the customer to determine whether I'm the right person or not. And I also want to come back to what you said initially, which is kind of the niching, the expertise, and so on. So my humble advice to fellow coaches is, just think of this analogy. You are a professional golf player. You are at the top of your game. We just had the golf DP World Tour final championships taking place in Dubai, actually, less than a month ago. And imagine you are really in the top 10 in the world, and you have a bad shoulder injury, right? Now, you could look up 10 competent surgeons who can help you with your problem. And there is this one guy or one woman in Switzerland, in the UAE, in Germany, who's done nothing else than this for about 10 or 12 years or 20 years. Now, if you had abundant money, which usually is the case when you're at the top of your game, who is your go-to? What option will you go for? And the same analogy applies to the field that I am in, which is, what I wish I had that strategic foresight to pick a niche and really, work it. But it just so happens that there isn't anyone else that I know of, and I've been in this field for long enough to know that exactly does what I do, to the quality that I do it, and with the determination and the thought leadership that's acknowledged by others. And so that's how I think about this whole topic. And that's my humble advice to other coaches, to think of their business in that way. Because guess what? If you're a GP, right, there will be plenty of GPs in town.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to distinguish yourself as, why should anyone fly to a different country to come and meet you for that, rather than to pick the GP with a 4.5 plus star rating on Google that is 5 minutes drive away from them. And so that's kind of my way of how I think about my business, and that's my advice, how I would advise other coaches to think about.
Yeah, you've developed very specific knowledge and solving a very, very clear problem. And when somebody has that problem, that particular specific problem, there's only one person to call. And then in the end, they call it luck. But their luck becomes your luck because you've spent so much time honing that craft and focusing on that specific problem. You were talking about freebies. And only the first 45 minutes are free. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. What do your overheads look like as a solopreneur?
So allow me by using a very concrete example without getting into the actual numbers. So when I came to the UAE, and that was a choice of us as a family, I had 4 months to myself. So I had September, October, November, December, because I worked the rest of the year in my kind of executive role for an amazing company called Vodafone. And so in those 4 months, I earned more than I earned as a full-time executive and being a full expat as an international assignee into the UK. Now, I thought to myself, maybe I just got lucky, maybe it was the LinkedIn post, maybe it was the fact that I just announced to the world that I'm open for business. And so I had 23 as a full year from January to December. And of course, I made a lot more than I did in the first 4 months in the first year of setting up my business. So I kind of knew that this may not be just a windfall. This may not be just a lucky streak, whatever the terminologies you want to use. And of course, we are now in 24. We are almost at the end of November. Less than a month ago, I already hit the numbers that I had last year. So what I can say is that what I'm doing is clearly working. And the fact that I have somehow built myself a niche that didn't really exist before has really worked very well for me. Now, you said without mentioning numbers. So what I can say is that I have established a 7-figure profit business in the first year of its foundation.
Wow. And your overheads are what % of your revenue?
Oh, it's less than 10% because I like to keep things light. I mean, a funny anecdote I tell everyone. I know of a few coaches who are either having a full-time permanent office or are looking for an office to establish themselves. I didn't really think that I would ever need an office. And the reason I don't need one is because my kind of clients would prefer to meet me in the boardroom because let's say if my office location was in Business Bay and they're based in downtown or they're based in Jebel Ali, it would take them 30 minutes to come and meet me and another 30 minutes to get back to their office. That's a full hour wasted in the busy diary, and that's the last thing they would want to do. So I settled for a business that's called Let's Work. It's a super flexible app. I met the founders. I fell in love with the idea that they had, which is I can pick from 120 plus locations any given day where I would like to work from on that day.
Amazing.
And then if I have face-to-face interactions with those clients, I can go and meet them. And if I do have virtual calls, I will pick a venue that offers me quiet and kind of noise-proof areas to be able to work from. So that means that what I spend on my office cost is less than a month of what I would pay to any tower management company to have an actual office rented there for a month.
Basically, your EBITDA margin is 90%.
It's more than that, yes.
More
yes,
than 90%.
Yeah, yes.
And you're not in a software business.
I am not in the software
joking.
business, no.
That's incredible.
I've automated everything you can automate. I mean, one of the other things that I share with, I also work as a mentor coach, so I help other coaches to kind of do what I have done, is called Calendly. Now, there's a whole range of those tools, Activity and all sorts of different similar tools. That one tool that literally cost me, I think, $100 a year, saves me 12 emails on average with the PA of an executive to say, can he do 10 a.m. next Wednesday? And she says, sorry, he's got a board meeting on that day. Can you do Thursday, 5 o'clock? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm traveling on that day. And so that just one tool, and every one of my clients get their own VIP private link to my diary, allows me to, not have to worry at all about scheduling, which takes a lot of time. And there are other such tools that I use. Canva is another one that costs roughly £100 a year. I create all my visuals myself. I do not have an agency. I do not have a virtual assistant. I never needed one. I'm kind of in the bespoke business, and my clients appreciate being able to have access to me. I do not charge extra for giving out my WhatsApp number to my clients, because I know as and when they need it, it's a good resource and a good number to have. And so that's kind of what I do, and that's how I've set up my entire business.
And when you look at your capacity, how do you measure what your capacity is? And would you, when trying to increase the capacity, would you bring on somebody else? Or would you just increase your price? Like, how does the supply and demand chart look like for you?
Sure. A lot of people have asked me this question, including clients, to say, are you now looking to hire 10 coaches?
Clone yourself in a Tesla robot.
Establish this coaching house that has, all sorts of different coaches. And the short answer to it is no, because I am just too much enjoying staying in the field, meaning doing the work. The last thing I would want to do, Alexander, is to spend 60% of my time managing those other 10 coaches.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, and I say this from a place of being humble and respectful, people typically want to work with the expert.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
And so again, imagine I'm that surgeon and you're that golf pro. Even if I had 5 very capable surgeons in my practice, it's unlikely, if you had the choice, you would want to work with any of them, no matter how highly I endorse those. And so that's one of the reasons I've decided to stay in the field, which is I just love the work and my clients love the results they see. And so why would I want to disrupt that? And then the second thing is, how can I, as you said, clone myself? And so, there are 2 or 3 things that I have pursued to establish what is called residual income or passive value coming to my business. So one of them is obviously the book. As it just happened last week on Friday, I woke up to an email from Amazon. My book was on the #1 bestseller list 3 years after its publishing date.
It's incredible.
Which is unbelievable. Like I wouldn't even know how to do that. It just still is going very strong. So that's kind of my #1 passive income source. The second one is something I've just started, and actually I will be delivering the training for it later on today. It's called Certified Transition Coach. And so that means that I am equipping more executive coaches. I don't teach them how to coach. They have to be accredited coaches when they come to me for the training. It's a 6-month program. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of equipping more coaches with the framework and the toolkits that I use for them to be enabled and empowered and go on to become amazing transition coaches. And of course, that's another way, because the training is 6 months, but it includes only 1 day of delivering the training and 2 check-in calls. So that's the second way I'm thinking about it. But the third project, I'm actually flying to Germany next week. And I will be recording in a video studio an immersive e-learning journey. And I've been working with an instruction designer to make it work. And so that e-learning product will be just an extension of what I do. It will cost a lot more than buying the most expensive version of my book, which currently is $40. And it will cost a lot less than doing the one-on-one work with me, which currently is a $48,000 price tag. So it will be offered kind of, in the middle of these two for those leaders who may not want to invest that sort of money, or the companies may not be quite prepared to make that investment on their behalf, but who want to do more than just reading and consuming the book. So these are just some ideas to show you how I am thinking about how can I replicate the work that I do without getting myself out of the zone and without distracting myself with all sorts of different random activities that all get me away from my clients and my coaching.
Yeah, if you dilute what you're known for, then you'll no longer be able to command the price from the top tier customers, which are probably the most important. But there's definitely other people who are interested in the value that you can bring.
Yes.
One question I always love to ask entrepreneurs is, what did your wife or spouse or someone say when you're like, by the way, I'm going to leave my C-suite executive job and become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, this is where you have to use the beep.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, I think it was just an inevitable choice. I mean, the book launched in January 22, and I gave it 7 months before I made that decision. I just had all these energy and excitement coming my way. I had people reaching out to me to say, I have this coach in the US and I want you to coach them. I had people reaching out, sometimes people that I didn't know and wasn't connected to. We got this global leadership conference in our company, which is usually an annual event in every company. And we are looking for a fresh new topic that is applicable to the senior leaders. We are, having this amazing podcast such as yours, and would love to have you as a guest. And so I just had to admit to myself that it's impossible to carry on doing what I was doing, which was a very full-time job, right? I was an HR executive. With my team, we looked after 27,000 people in 24 markets. I partnered with the group CFO. I was spending a fair amount of time traveling on business, and I'm a husband, and I'm a father, and I am a coach. To be able to really do this properly, I had to make a hard choice, which is, okay, I'm going to let this baby die on its own slowly, or I'm going to take what is my side passion and make it my full-time profession. I went for the latter.
I think what's an important point there is that everything happened so fast and there was so much engagement because you had really identified a big problem. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't take the time to analyze what is the problem that they're solving, because every single business or every single solopreneur or every single exchange of value is usually a solution to a problem. How big is this problem that you're solving? Like, quantify it for me.
Sure. So there is one study that quantifies the premature departure of CEOs in the S&P 500, which is the largest 500 companies in the US, to cost the company roughly $12 million on average.
Wow.
Now, my own research proves that this is more a 30 times the cost of the exec, and if you just take $1 million as an average. So I'm solving a $30 million problem with an investment that currently costs less than $50,000.
And I can't do that X on my computer. Have you figured out that X?
It's a lot more than the 10X. But
sure.
the reality is it's true, and it's not something that I just find compelling and I'm telling. There are 4 independent studies that all come to the same conclusion. And one of the largest studies I have found for the research is Heidrick & Struggles, one of the largest search firms in the world. They have, over a period of 10 years, they've placed just over 20,000 executives, of which 40% were not enrolled 18 months after they have been appointed. 40%, 4 out of 10 don't make it. And so again, I wish every leadership study had such a large sample.
I mean, what's
size.
the total addressable market on that? 30 million times 22,000?
It is much
40%
bigger.
Of that.
I'll give you one other idea in
those
terms
numbers
of the
are
number.
wild.
Yeah, and I have it's really in the trillions. I cited in my book as to what is the potential downside if we just did nothing.
Yeah.
right? Which is one option. I mean, we at Vodafone, we call that the do nothing scenario, right? Do nothing scenario. So, you just leave the proposition and don't touch it. That's always an option. Sometimes people forget about that. So if you think of it again, there is in every organization that is, let's say, 1,000 people or more. If you look at the executive level, that number is usually around 12 to 30, right? And if you think about a 20% attrition or churn, which is very normal, you're looking at 5 to 12 executives churning each year. Now, either they're churning from the level below Exco into the Exco, or they move from the finance function into the CEO role, or they move out of the company into another company. That's just one company. So that's 5 to 12 times an opportunity for someone like myself to do the work. And if you think about how many companies exist of that size, it's not a number that even ChatGPT could give you, which is why I've set up this coach training, and I'm giving away my deeper secrets to all of these incredible coaches, because I am certainly not able to address what is the addressable market here.
And how do you choose how to profit maximize your costs, basically, when you know that the total addressable market's in the trillions, you know that one failed exec could be 30 million US dollars? How do you figure out where to find your market clearing price, basically?
Yes, I don't really spend too much time thinking about price. As a matter of fact, the rate that I'm charging today is more than twice of what I used to charge just 2.5 years ago when I was still in my executive role. And at the time, that market rate, I mean, UK is a very competitive market for coaches and coaching services, was pretty much on top of the market. So that was like the top of the house. So what I'm doing is I am increasing my rates year on year without thinking too much about, is there a mathematical formula that I can raise my rates? I'm essentially trying to keep the total number of my clients to 20 to 24 each year. And I've never had issues, clients turning me down. And if they do, it's generally not because of the price.
Yeah.
And that's what I found. So, one of the pieces of advice that my publisher gave me about the pricing of my book was, the next best-selling book next to mine is The First 90 Days. It sold 1.2 million copies over its shelf life, which is now 21 years. And that book is selling as a paperback for $16.43. It's like a strange number. And they said Harvard Business School Publishing is obviously very knowledgeable about the market and so on. And that is the sweet spot for the price for a book such as yours. I decided to put my book at a $29.99 price point because I fundamentally believe that for the executive leader that this book is written for, whether the book costs $15, $20, $30, or even $40 is really not a material decision point. Same with the shoulder surgery. And if that one expert in Switzerland charges 3 times what everyone else is charging, guess what? You got one shoulder and one career. And so if you can afford it, you will not put the offer down or start to negotiate hard on, I want a 10% discount on whatever rate you have. And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about, not just the book, but that's just a simple example of how I think about pricing. I really think about, and it's easy for me to do that because I used to be my own client group, right? I used to be an executive. I know what an executive thinks about, how they make decisions. I have been in the trenches. I got all these scar wounds in my face because I have been doing the work. I've been walking the walk. I'm not just some theoretical person that did like his coach education and just been coaching for 25 years. Since then,
you're not a life coach at 21.
I am not. And I know what it takes to succeed. And I know how hard such setbacks are. One aspect we haven't touched upon is, you said, what is the cost to the organization? And obviously that is a painful amount of money to pay to anyone for a failed case. The reality is, Alexander, that the actual executive pays the highest price when they fail because they are unlikely to get a role that is similar or bigger than the one that they just spectacularly failed at. And so again, it's also the risk minimization that comes into play. Or if you want to, look at it and frame it more positively, it's the upside potential that you can go for when you have that table stakes appointment just landed.
Definitely.
And so that's what I do. And there is a huge market for that.
And what would you say are the top 3 reasons that executives fail?
Yes. So I'm glad you asked about the top 3 and not the top 10, because the top 10 make an entire chapter in my book. So if I wanted to group those top 10 into 3 reasons, it's people, it's culture, and it's politics. So it's not, as one would assume, the lack of functional or technical skills that gets in the way. So let's say if you have been appointed CFO of company X, it's usually not the issue that you really don't know how to work the balance sheet. Or if you have been just appointed, chief people officer of a reputable firm, it's usually not the case that you have no idea how to take the strategy of the firm and translate it into the people agenda. So it's not those that get in the way, but it's what we call in HR the soft skills or the lack of those. People, culture, and politics are the top 3 group reasons for executive transition failure.
And what would be the 3 tips that you would give an executive who's transitioning?
Yes. So the first one is, and I actually talk about this in my book, and someone recently accused me at a conference to say, "Oh, you're just marketing your own service." I said, to my own defense, when I wrote the book, I was a full-time exec and not really thinking about jumping ship or doing anything like that. So it's to really get the support that you need. Right? Now, the degree of support depends on how confident and competent you feel. If you have done what you are doing right now several times successfully, you are probably in a good place to just read my book or listen to the audiobook version and be good with it. 8 out of 10 times, though, if it's a first-time appointment, you will actually benefit working with myself or someone who has gone through the same methodology and really knows what they're doing and has credible references to show you so that you can check them out on your own and decide whether they're the right partner for you. So that's my top tip. The second tip is, and this is really a problem I see, the first 90 days being such a popular book, it really is nowhere near sufficient for an executive level transition. It's a general or generic onboarding book. Oftentimes, I actually highlight and recommend the book to first-time managers, who are in their 20s or early 30s. To cite a concrete example, the Double Diamond Framework of Executive Transitions consists of 7 phases, of which only 1 is the first 90 days. So that should give you an idea about how much more work there is involved to this. Yeah. And that brings me to the third and final tip, which is there's another gentleman who I happen to know. His name is Michael Burrows. And he wrote another amazing book that is nowhere near as popular as the first 90 days. And his book is called Before Onboarding. And again, it's beyond me why any executive should sit on their hands and start to onboard themselves on day 1 and be done after day 90 in the new job. And that is one of the reasons I took his book and the idea of his book and made it the first of the 7 phases, which is, I call it the discover phase. There are very concrete things that an executive can do ahead of their actual start date, such as and when it's announced, reaching out to the future stakeholders, doing onboarding interviews with them to educate himself around the company, the role and the key successes and mistakes of his predecessor. He or she can reach out to his future team that he or she will inherit and start to introduce himself and get a sense for who he will be doing the work with. He or she can get their hands, once a contract is signed, on valuable information such as company strategy documents, even things that are deemed to be confidential, because he will be an insider very soon. And so it's those things that the executive can do in terms of top tips to really succeed.
It's basically just being curious about what you're going into, asking all the questions, understanding the context, understanding the people. And as you said, soft skills are so important. And these soft skills are not taught in education. Our education system doesn't teach you emotional intelligence, how to deal with people. I was actually on LinkedIn today and I read a post, and it's like managing people is basically just diffusing situations and getting people to work with one another. you know? And usually that means to put your guard down a little bit or show a little bit of like
vulnerability. Yes.
Exactly. You know? So no, that's very, very interesting. My closing question to you is, what is the luckiest thing that ever happened to you?
Oh, I think the luckiest thing that ever happened to me was when our son was born. And, you know, my wife and I took our time with the family planning. We weren't quite sure. We had been moving countries and continents every 2 to 3 years prior to that. And so we weren't sure that this kind of a lifestyle would really suit a child or children. But I think that's probably the best thing that's ever happened to us. And it's something that we are incredibly grateful for.
I'm due to have a kid in May as well. And I'm really
congratulations.
looking forward to it.
Yes.
So that's beautiful to hear. Thank you so much, Navid. It's been a beautiful talk. How can people buy your book? How can they follow you on socials? How can they connect with you?
Sure. So I am quite active on LinkedIn. I do 1 post a week on average. I'm a blue badge holder, so that means that the platform deems me to be an influencer of some kind. And I actually do my own LinkedIn account, which means if people reach out to me with connection invites or messages, I actually respond to them. It's not some VA sitting in the Philippines or anything like that. And the book is available anywhere people can buy books from. So obviously Amazon being the largest book-selling platform, but it's also available on Audible, on Spotify, in your local bookstore. So the book can be essentially purchased anywhere people can get their books from.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to building a long-lasting friendship with you. And thank you for coming on the pod. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I think there's a lot of value to be taken there. I can't wait to dig into my signed copy of the book, and hope you guys found value. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander.